I'm Bronson, 32, a software engineer from Seattle. My dad and I became inseparable after Mom died when I was 16. For 10 years, we were each other's rock. Then Jessica entered our lives. 3 years into their marriage, she delivered the ultimatum that shattered everything. Either he leaves this house and your life, or I do. She screamed at my father. The silence that followed seemed eternal before Dad finally spoke. Bronson, maybe you should go. I packed my bags quietly that night. They had no idea what I had already set in motion months before. Before I continue this story, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from. Hit that like button and subscribe to join our storytelling community. My mother's battle with cancer was brutal. Watching her fade away over 18 months broke something in both Dad and me. She was our compass, our heart. When she finally found peace, Dad and I were left standing alone in a world that suddenly felt too big and too empty. Robert Peterson was a strong man, physically and emotionally. But losing Mom nearly destroyed him. The only thing that kept him going was me. And honestly, the only thing that kept me going was him. We developed routines that became our lifelines. Every Sunday morning, no matter the weather, we'd take our fishing boat out on Lake Washington. We rarely caught anything impressive, but that wasn't the point. Out on the water, with no one else around, we could talk about Mom without breaking down. We could share memories, express regrets, and sometimes just sit in silence, watching our fishing lines create gentle ripples across the surface. She would be proud of you, Bronson, Dad would often say as the morning fog lifted from the lake. Going after your dreams in technology. Building something from nothing. That's the courage she always admired. My startup was developing accessibility software for people with visual impairments. It wasn't making money yet, but I believed in its potential. Dad believed too. He invested a significant portion of his savings to help me get it off the ground. His accounting business was stable and successful, though somewhat outdated technologically, which is where I came in. I modernized his systems, created a client portal, and helped him embrace digital bookkeeping. Our professional lives became intertwined, just as our personal lives had always been. 10 years passed this way. We had built a new normal. The raw grief had transformed into something manageable, a quiet ache rather than a stabbing pain. We dated occasionally, but nothing serious ever developed for either of us. I think we were both a little afraid of letting anyone new into our carefully balanced world. Then came the client appreciation event Dad hosted at a local waterfront restaurant. Among the guests was Jessica Harmon, the new financial advisor at Seattle Credit Union. At 38, she was sophisticated, confident, and immediately drawn to Dad. I noticed how she laughed at his corny accounting jokes that usually only earned polite smiles from others. She asked thoughtful questions about his business and, more importantly, about our family photos on his phone. "Your late wife was beautiful," she said, studying a picture of Mom. I see where Bronson got his eyes. That comment alone earned her points with both of us. Most people avoided mentioning Mom, unsure how we'd react. Jessica seemed to understand that acknowledging Mom's existence was the right approach. Dad started smiling more often. He began coming home early from the office, something that hadn't happened in years. When he mentioned going out for dinner with Jessica, I encouraged him. When he worried about whether it was too soon after all these years, I reminded him that Mom would want him to be happy. "She's different, Bronson," Dad confided after their 5th date. "She asks about Catherine all the time, wants to know what she was like, what made her laugh. She says she doesn't want to replace your mother's memory, just create new happiness alongside it." Those were exactly the right words. And I found myself genuinely happy as their relationship blossomed. 8 months later, Dad nervously showed me the engagement ring. "Do you think it's too fast?" he asked, uncharacteristically uncertain. "Does she make you happy?" I asked. "Happier than I thought possible again," he admitted. "Then it's not too fast," I assured him. The wedding was small but beautiful, held in the garden of our family home. Jessica was radiant, and Dad looked younger than he had in years. During the reception, Jessica pulled me aside. "Thank you for accepting me, Bronson," she said, squeezing my hand. "I know how close you and Robert are. Your blessing means everything to him." The first few months were harmonious. Jessica fit into our routines without disrupting them. She joined us for Sunday breakfasts but politely declined fishing, saying it was important for Dad and me to maintain our traditions. She showed interest in my startup and asked intelligent questions about the technology. I started to think of her as a friend, maybe someday even a maternal figure, though I was already an adult. But then came the subtle shifts. Jessica began answering Dad's phone when I called. "Oh, he's in the shower," or "he's taking a nap." Messages I left wouldn't be delivered. Our fishing trips were occasionally canceled because Jessica had made other plans for Dad. "She just wants to create some special memories with me," Dad explained after the third cancellation. "She's never had the kind of partnership her parents did, and she's excited about building traditions together." That seemed reasonable. Everyone deserves happiness and excitement in a new relationship. So, when Jessica began redecorating the house, removing some of Mom's artwork, and replacing family photos with new ones of her and Dad, I tried to be understanding. "Jessica needs to feel this is her home too," Dad said when I mentioned the disappearing photos. "We've kept things the same for so long. Maybe some change is good for all of us." Again, this seemed logical. I dismissed my unease as overprotectiveness. After all, wasn't I the one who encouraged Dad to move forward? I needed to practice what I preached, but something in my gut was beginning to whisper warnings I wasn't yet ready to hear. Our first missed fishing trip came 6 months into the marriage. The night before, Dad called to cancel. "Jessica's planned a surprise anniversary dinner," he explained, sounding genuinely torn. 6 months since the wedding. I had no idea she was organizing something. "That's thoughtful of her," I said, ignoring the fact that we'd never celebrated monthly anniversaries in our family. "We can go next weekend." But the next weekend, Jessica wasn't feeling well and needed Dad at home. I offered to come over and help, but was told she was resting and didn't want visitors. 2 weeks later, we finally made it onto the lake, but Dad checked his phone constantly, clearly anxious about being away. Around this time, my startup received its first major investment offer. This was the breakthrough we'd been working toward for years. I arranged a celebration dinner and invited Dad, who had been so instrumental in getting the business off the ground. An hour before we were supposed to meet, he called to cancel. "Jessica's having an emergency with her sister," he explained hurriedly. "She needs me to drive her to Tacoma right away." "I'm so sorry, Bronson. I'm incredibly proud of you." I later discovered through a mutual friend that there had been no emergency. Jessica had simply decided they should attend a cocktail party hosted by her former colleagues instead. When I visited the family home the following weekend, I barely recognized the living room. The comfortable, slightly worn furniture had been replaced with modern, angular pieces. Mom's carefully collected art pieces were gone, substituted with abstract canvases in colors that never would have appealed to Dad before. "Where are the family photos?" I asked, noticing the bare mantelpiece where a timeline of our family milestones had once stood. Jessica felt there were too many reminders of the past, Dad said, not quite meeting my eyes. "She's created a lovely album of them that we keep in the study." Later that day, I overheard Jessica talking to Dad about household finances. "Let me handle the bills from now on, Robert," she said in a tone that sounded concerned but felt controlling. "You have enough stress with the business. I have experience in financial management. It makes sense for me to take this off your plate." Dad agreed without hesitation. This was the man who had meticulously managed both business and household finances for decades, who had taught me the importance of understanding where every dollar went. Now he was handing over control without question. I began noticing other changes in Dad. His wardrobe shifted from comfortable classics to trendier styles that seemed at odds with his personality. His usual playful humor was replaced by a more serious demeanor. When I mentioned these observations, he became defensive. People evolve, Bronson. Jessica helps me see new perspectives. Maybe you should be more open to change yourself. Christmas that year was particularly difficult. For the first time, we didn't hang the ornaments Mom had collected throughout her life. Instead, Jessica had purchased a completely new set in a coordinating color scheme. Dad didn't play Santa, as he always had, distributing gifts with elaborate made-up stories about each one. Instead, Jessica orchestrated a formal gift exchange with specific times for opening presents. When I tried to have a heart-to-heart with Dad about these changes, Jessica appeared within minutes, as if she'd been listening at the door. "Are you two having a serious discussion without me?" she asked with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Family matters should include all family, don't you think? One evening, I arrived early for dinner and overheard Jessica on the phone in the kitchen. "Of course, Robert misses our couple's yoga when he goes fishing with Bronson," she was saying. "But I can't be the one to say anything. I need to be the supportive wife. It breaks my heart to see him exhausted on Mondays, after giving up his one day to rest." When Dad later mentioned perhaps scaling back our fishing trips to once a month, to be fair to Jessica, I realized she was systematically driving a wedge between us. I reached out to Aunt Linda, Mom's sister, who had kept in close touch over the years. "I've noticed the changes too," she confirmed. "Robert rarely returns my calls anymore. When he does, Jessica is always there, commenting in the background. Last time I visited, she made a point of mentioning how much money Robert spends maintaining relationships with Catherine's side. As if we haven't been family for 30 years, Jessica's criticism of me became more overt. She questioned my dedication to the startup, suggesting I was wasting Dad's investment. She made comments about my apartment, my clothes, even my dating choices. "Bronson could really use some guidance on professional appearance," she said to Dad during one dinner. As if I wasn't sitting right there. First impressions are everything in business. Those investor meetings might go better with a wardrobe upgrade. What hurt most was hearing Dad echo these sentiments later. "Jessica has a point about your presentation, son. Maybe it's time to polish your image a bit." The dad who had always told me to be authentically myself was vanishing before my eyes, replaced by someone who measured worth by external appearances and social standing. The man who had been my best friend was becoming a stranger, and I felt powerless to stop it. The breaking point came suddenly, though in retrospect, it was inevitable. I was helping Dad organize some stored items in the garage when I came across a box containing Mom's personal belongings. Among them was a hand-blown glass vase, an anniversary gift from Dad that she had treasured. I brought it inside, thinking it deserved a place in the house again. Jessica walked into the living room as I was finding a spot for it on the bookshelf. "What's that?" she asked, her tone immediately sharp. "It's a vase Dad gave Mom for their 15th anniversary, I explained. The artist was a local woman who Mom supported when she was just starting out. Now her work is in galleries across the country." Jessica picked it up, turning it with what appeared to be curiosity, but felt more like assessment. "It doesn't really match our aesthetic now," she said. Then, as if in slow motion, her grip loosened, and the vase slipped from her hands, shattering on the hardwood floor. "Oh," she gasped, pressing her hand to her mouth. "How clumsy of me." But there had been nothing clumsy about it. Our eyes met, and in that moment, I saw something cold and deliberate in her expression. When Dad rushed in from the garden, Jessica was already in tears. "I feel terrible, Robert. I was just trying to appreciate it, and it slipped. Bronson must think I'm awful." "It was an accident," Dad said firmly, putting his arm around her. "When I started to protest, His expression hardened. Let it go, Bronson. It's just a thing. Things can be replaced. But it wasn't just a thing. It was a memory, a piece of Mom. And Jessica knew exactly what she was doing when she let it fall. A week later, Jessica suggested that Dad reduce his involvement in my startup. The stress isn't good for you, Robert. And honestly, if the business was going to take off, wouldn't it have happened by now? I hate seeing you pour good money after bad. I was stunned. My company had just secured its second round of funding and was gaining industry recognition. We were on track to break even within the year, exactly according to our business plan. Around this time, I received an unexpected call from Thomas Williams, a banking colleague of Jessica's. He seemed uncomfortable, asking if we could meet in person. Over coffee, he revealed something disturbing. Jessica wasn't a financial advisor at Seattle Credit Union like she claimed, he said. She was in administrative support. She was fired for accessing client accounts without authorization. The bank kept it quiet to avoid alarming customers. But I thought you should know. Given your father's business, I confronted Jessica with this information during Sunday dinner, trying to keep my tone neutral and fact-based. Her response was masterful. She burst into tears, claiming Thomas had sexually harassed her at work and was spreading lies because she had rejected him. She twisted my words to make it sound like I was accusing her of criminal behavior rather than simply asking about her employment history. Why are you so determined to think the worst of me? She sobbed to Dad. I've tried so hard to be part of this family. Dad was immediately protective. That's enough, Bronson. Jessica doesn't deserve to be attacked in her own home. Her own home. Not our family home anymore. Later that night, Dad came to me in the guest room where I was staying. You need to apologize to Jessica, he said. She's been nothing but supportive of you and your business ventures. Dad, I'm concerned about her influence over you. I tried to explain. Have you noticed how many of your old friends you don't see anymore? How you've changed your habits, your appearance, even your opinions to match hers? That's what marriage is, he replied defensively. Compromise and growth. Your mother would understand that. Mom would never have isolated you from people who care about you, I said, immediately regretting bringing her into this. Dad's face hardened. Don't presume to know what your mother would think. Jessica is my wife now, and you need to respect that, or keep your distance. Through a conversation with our family lawyer, I learned that Dad had recently changed his will, reducing what would have been my inheritance from the family business and home. Jessica had convinced him to place more assets in joint accounts and trusts that she would control if anything happened to him. My best friend Marcus finally witnessed Jessica's duplicity firsthand when he overheard her speaking about me at a charity event, unaware he was just around the corner. Robert's son is still so dependent, she told another couple. Emotionally stunted since his mother died. We practically support him and that hobby business of his. Robert is too kind to cut the cord, but we're working on establishing healthier boundaries. Marcus was furious. The way she talked about you was completely different when she turned around and saw me, he reported. Suddenly you were brilliant, Bronson. And she was so proud of your entrepreneurial spirit. Through subtle comments and manufactured misunderstandings, Jessica was turning our mutual family friends against me. She would mention being worried about Bronson's jealousy of her relationship with Robert to one person, then tell another she was concerned about Bronson's financial decisions. None of these comments were substantial enough to confront directly, but together they created an impression that I was unstable and resentful. Dad became increasingly isolated from extended family. Aunt Linda's invitations were declined. Holiday gatherings with cousins were replaced by exclusive events with Jessica's colleagues. Dad, once the center of our large family network, was being systematically removed from it. Thanksgiving brought the situation to a boiling point. I had been dating Allison for several months and brought her to dinner. Jessica spent the entire evening making subtle digs at Allison's teaching career. Such important work, even if the pay is disappointing. Her dress, Brave of you to wear something so casual to a holiday dinner. And even her family background. Community college is nothing to be ashamed of. Not everyone is academically inclined. By dessert, Allison was fighting back tears. She excused herself, and when I followed her outside, she said she couldn't take any more. I didn't blame her for leaving. When I returned to confront Jessica, she had already spun the narrative to Dad. I was just trying to get to know her better, she insisted. Some people are so sensitive. Maybe that's why Bronson has trouble maintaining relationships. Dad nodded in agreement. You should call and apologize to Allison for bringing her into a tense situation, he suggested, completely missing who had created the tension in the first place. Later that week, Dad called to discuss my behavior. Jessica feels you're unable to accept my happiness, he said. She's suggested we take a break from our Sunday gatherings until you can approach our relationship with more maturity. It was at that moment I realized the full scope of what was happening. Jessica wasn't just difficult or insecure. She was systematically destroying my relationship with my father through calculated, strategic moves. This wasn't normal family friction. It was emotional warfare, and I was losing. The night after Dad missed my birthday dinner, the first time in 16 years he had ever forgotten it, I hit rock bottom. I sat in my apartment, surrounded by unopened gifts from friends, staring at my phone that remained stubbornly silent. No call, no text, nothing. Jessica had scheduled a spa weekend for them, conveniently falling on my birthday. When I'd mentioned the timing, Dad had seemed confused, checking his calendar with a frown before Jessica smoothly interjected that they could celebrate with Bronson next week instead. Now, as midnight approached with still no acknowledgement from him, something inside me broke. I sobbed until my throat was raw, grieving not just the missed birthday but the systematic dismantling of the most important relationship in my life. Around 2 a.m., exhausted but unable to sleep, I began researching. I typed controlling spouse isolating partner from family into my laptop and fell down a rabbit hole of information about emotional manipulation, gaslighting, and narcissistic personality patterns. The descriptions matched Jessica's behavior with disturbing accuracy. By morning, my sadness had hardened into resolve. I would not lose my father without a fight, but I needed to be strategic. Jessica was too skilled at manipulation for direct confrontation to work. I needed evidence, allies, and a plan. My first step was consulting with Michelle Stevens, our family lawyer, who had known us since before Mom died. I couldn't tell her everything, as she still worked with Dad's business, but I framed my questions carefully. I'm concerned about Dad's financial vulnerability in his marriage, I explained. What protections exist to ensure Jessica can't access his business assets or personal inheritance from Mom? Michelle's expression told me she had her own concerns. Your father has made several changes recently that I advised against, she admitted. I can't share specifics due to client confidentiality, but I'm glad you're asking these questions. She helped me understand what legal protections I could put in place for the portions of the business that were already in my name, as well as how to document any troubling patterns I observed. I created a systematic approach to gathering information. I started recording conversations when legally permitted, saving texts and emails, and keeping a detailed journal of incidents with dates, times, and witnesses. I established a secure cloud storage account where all this evidence was backed up. Through careful research, I discovered Jessica had been married twice before, each time to successful, established men who had experienced significant financial losses during the relationships. I managed to track down her second ex-husband, James Forrester, who now lived in Portland. I wasn't going to say anything, James said when I finally convinced him to meet with me. But since you found me and asked directly, yes. Jessica followed a pattern. First, she was charming and supportive. Then, she began isolating me from friends and family, especially anyone who questioned her. By the end, she had control of most of my finances and had convinced me that everyone else was against us. James shared documentation from their divorce proceedings that revealed Jessica had transferred significant funds from their joint accounts before filing for divorce. This matched financial movements I had begun to notice in Dad's accounts. I secured family heirlooms and important documents, quietly moving them to a safe deposit box only I could access. Photos of Mom that had disappeared from the house, jewelry that had been in our family for generations, even Dad's military service medals. I gathered them all to protect them from being accidentally discarded. I opened a separate business account for assets Dad had invested in my startup, legally structuring it so that Jessica couldn't touch those funds, even if she gained control of Dad's finances. It wasn't about the money, but about protecting what Dad had worked for. I discovered Jessica had been systematically deleting family photos from Dad's cloud storage, including irreplaceable images of Mom. I created digital backups of everything, storing multiple copies in secure locations. Knowing I might need a place to land if things escalated, I prepared a comfortable apartment in a building owned by Marcus's family. I moved essential belongings there gradually, creating a safety net for myself. I also built a support network of people who could help Dad see the truth when the time came. Aunt Linda, who had witnessed Jessica's manipulative behavior. Marcus, who had heard her two-faced comments firsthand. Several family friends who had noticed the troubling changes in Dad. Even Jessica's former colleague Thomas, who had evidence of her professional misconduct. There were moments when I questioned myself. Was I becoming obsessive? Was I the problem? Unable to accept Dad's new life, as Jessica suggested? But then came confirmation that my concerns were justified. I discovered Jessica had been secretly transferring funds from Dad's retirement accounts into a separate account only she could access. Small amounts each time, but adding up to over $100,000 in the past year. This wasn't about jealousy or inability to let go. This was about protecting my father from someone who was systematically exploiting him emotionally and financially. The plan was in motion, but I needed to be patient. Confronting Jessica directly would only allow her to paint me as the villain again. I needed irrefutable evidence and the right moment to present it. I needed Dad to see the truth for himself. I just didn't expect the breaking point to come so suddenly or so painfully. Jessica's carefully constructed facade began cracking the day she discovered I had met with her ex-husband. A mutual acquaintance innocently mentioned seeing me in Portland, meeting with James Forrester about something important. Jessica's reaction was immediate, though masked with her usual smile. James? My ex? How strange Bronson would seek him out, she said lightly. I hope he's not trying to dig up dirt on me. Some divorces are just so messy, with so many unsubstantiated accusations. That evening, I received a barrage of texts from Dad, demanding to know why I was investigating Jessica's past. I responded honestly, explaining my concerns about financial irregularities and her pattern of isolating him from family and friends. The next day, Jessica confronted me. When I stopped by their house, Dad was still at work, which I suspected was intentional on her part. How dare you contact James, she hissed, dropping her pleasant mask entirely. My past relationships are none of your business. They become my business. When I see the same patterns repeating with my father, I replied calmly. Like the money being transferred from his retirement accounts, her face went pale, then quickly flushed with anger. I'm helping manage his finances for our future. Something you apparently can't understand with your failed business, eating up his investments. My business is profitable now, Jessica. The only person taking Dad's money is you. She stepped closer, her voice dropping to a threatening whisper. Robert trusts me completely. Who do you think he'll believe? The devoted wife who brought happiness back into his life, or the jealous son who can't let go of his daddy? For the first time, I saw the real Jessica, without pretense or manipulation. The cold calculation in her eyes was chilling. He'll believe evidence, I said. Bank statements don't lie. She laughed, but there was no humor in it. You have no idea how much influence I have over your father. He'll explain away anything if I ask him to. That night, Jessica orchestrated her masterpiece of manipulation. At dinner, Dad had invited me over, saying we needed to clear the air. I arrived to find Jessica had prepared all his favorite foods and was playing the perfect hostess, though the tension was palpable. Halfway through the meal, she carefully placed her fork down and took a deep breath, as if gathering courage. Then the tears started. Delicate and perfectly timed. "Robert, I can't do this anymore," she said, her voice breaking artfully. "I've tried so hard to be part of this family, to love Bronson as my own, but he hates me. He's been investigating me, talking to my ex-husband, making accusations about money." Dad looked stunned, turning to me with confusion and anger building in his expression. "I love you too much to make you choose," Jessica continued, reaching for Dad's hand across the table. "But I can't live like this, with constant suspicion and hostility in my own home." Then came the ultimatum, delivered between perfectly timed sobs. "Either he leaves this house and your life, or I do. I'm sorry, but I can't take it anymore." The silence that followed seemed to stretch for eternity. I sat perfectly still, watching my father's face as he processed her words. I could see the conflict, the pain, the confusion. For a moment, I thought he might see through her manipulation. Then he spoke the words that shattered my world. "Bronson, maybe you should go." In that moment, something fundamental broke between us. 10 years of being each other's rock after Mom died, erased by 5 words. As Dad stared down at his plate, unable to meet my eyes, Jessica briefly caught my gaze. Behind Dad's back, her expression shifted from manufactured distress to smug triumph. A slight smirk played at the corner of her mouth before she buried her face in Dad's shoulder, her body shaking with what he thought were sobs, but I recognized as satisfaction. "Dad," I began, fighting to keep my voice steady. "This is exactly what she wants. She's been working to separate us since the beginning." "Enough." Dad's fist hit the table, rattling the dishes. "You see? This is exactly what Jessica's talking about. You can't accept that I've found happiness again. You interpret everything she does in the worst possible light. Because she's manipulating you," I insisted. "The money from your retirement accounts, the lies about her past, the systematic isolation from everyone who cares about you. Can't you see it?" "What I see is my son refusing to grow up," Dad said, his voice cold in a way I'd never heard before. "Jessica supports me, believes in me. All you do is criticize and cling to the past." Jessica's performance continued, each sob driving the wedge deeper between us. "I never wanted this," she whispered. "I just wanted us to be a family." Dad stood up, putting his arm around her protectively. "I think you should leave now, Bronson. When you're ready to apologize to Jessica and approach our family with respect, we can talk again. Our family. Not you and me. Dad and son." Jessica had successfully redefined his concept of family to exclude me. I maintained my composure as I stood to leave. "I love you, Dad. That hasn't changed. When you're ready to see what's really happening, I'll be there." He wouldn't meet my eyes. At home, I packed methodically, taking only what I would need for the next few weeks. I had prepared for this possibility, but the reality of it was still devastating. I moved quietly through my apartment, selecting clothes, important documents, and a few personal items with the strange detachment that comes with profound shock. Around midnight, my phone rang. It was Dad. "Son," he began, his voice heavy. "I think we both need some space to cool down. Jessica suggested that maybe this is an opportunity for you to become more independent. She thinks I've enabled your reliance on me since your mother died." "Is that what you think?" I asked quietly. The pause before he answered told me everything. "I think there's some truth to it," he finally said, clearly repeating words that had been fed to him. "This separation might be good. For both of us. It's temporary, until things calm down. How long is temporary, Dad? Another telling pause. Let's just take it a day at a time. After we hung up, I sat in the darkness of my apartment, letting the full weight of what had happened sink in. The man who had been my best friend, my supporter, my family, had chosen someone he'd known for 3 years over the son he'd raised for 32. The betrayal cut deeper than I could have imagined. The next morning, I arrived at the house to collect a few remaining belongings. Dad was at work, but Jessica was there, watching from the staircase as I gathered photos and books from my old room. "He'll never believe you over me," she said conversationally, as if discussing the weather. "Men like your father are so predictable. They'll choose a woman who makes them feel strong and desired over anyone else, even their children." I didn't give her the satisfaction of a response. I simply finished packing my things and walked toward the door. "Don't expect an invitation to Thanksgiving," she called after me. "Family only." I paused at the threshold, looking back at the woman who had dismantled my relationship with my father piece by piece. "This isn't over," I said quietly. Her laugh followed me out the door. "It absolutely is. You just don't know it yet." She had no idea what I had already set in motion. The first week of separation from Dad was the hardest. My phone remained silent, no calls or texts from him. I resisted the urge to reach out, knowing Jessica would intercept any communication and spin it to her advantage. Instead, I focused on executing the plan I had carefully developed over the previous months. My first action was activating the legal protections for the startup Dad had invested in. I filed the paperwork that formalized his investment as a loan rather than equity, protecting his financial contribution, while limiting Jessica's ability to claim any ownership interest in the company. I met with Michelle, our family attorney, to initiate the broader financial protection plan we had discussed. She couldn't take action on Dad's behalf without his knowledge, but she could document the concerns and establish a timeline of events that might be needed later. "Your father has always been prudent with his finances," Michelle noted. "These recent changes are out of character. I've seen similar situations before, and they rarely end well without intervention." Aunt Linda was my strongest ally. She had witnessed Jessica's manipulative behavior firsthand and had maintained detailed records of her own interactions with both Jessica and Dad. A week after the ultimatum dinner, she visited Dad at his office, deliberately choosing a time when Jessica wouldn't be present. "Robert, I'm worried about you," she told him directly. "You've changed since Jessica came into your life. You've withdrawn from family, changed your financial habits, and now you've pushed away Bronson, who has been your rock for years." Dad was defensive, repeating Jessica's narratives about me being jealous and unable to let go. But Aunt Linda didn't back down. She showed him photos of Jessica with her previous husbands, documentation of the pattern of isolation and financial control that had characterized those relationships. "I'm not asking you to take my word for it," she said. "I'm asking you to look at the evidence and ask yourself if there might be some truth to our concerns." She reported that Dad had listened, albeit reluctantly, and had seemed troubled by the parallels she pointed out. It was a small crack in Jessica's facade, but a significant one. The next development came when Jessica discovered she couldn't access certain accounts she thought were under her control. The separate business account I had established for Dad's investment in my startup was protected by legal structures she couldn't penetrate. Her panicked call to Dad was overheard by his secretary, who had always been fond of me, and reported the conversation. She was furious, Angela told me, demanding to know why she couldn't access the funds, insisting that as his wife, she had a right to all financial information. Dad's sister Margaret, who had initially been charmed by Jessica, began to see through the manipulation after witnessing a revealing incident at a family gathering. Jessica had thought no one was in earshot when she berated Dad for spending too much time talking to his brother-in-law about their shared interest in vintage cars. She told him he was embarrassing her with his boring obsessions. Margaret reported to me, "I've never seen Robert look so defeated." When I confronted her later, She completely changed her story, claiming she was just concerned about his blood pressure when he gets excited about his hobbies. Margaret became another crucial ally, presenting Dad with her own observations and concerns in a way he couldn't easily dismiss. The most damning evidence came through an anonymous delivery to Dad's office. Jessica's employment termination documents from Seattle Credit Union, clearly stating she had been fired for unauthorized access to client accounts, along with witness statements describing her pattern of targeting wealthy clients for personal relationships. Dad never mentioned receiving these documents, but his secretary, Angela, confirmed he had spent hours alone in his office after opening the package, canceling his appointments for the remainder of the day. Jessica's behavior became increasingly erratic as her control began to slip. She made a scene at Dad's company holiday party, accusing one of his female employees of flirting with him. She began checking his phone more openly, questioning his whereabouts, and restricting his activities in ways that were becoming obvious to everyone around them. Dad's awakening happened gradually, through the accumulated weight of evidence and observations from multiple trusted sources. His brother Thomas, who had initially stayed neutral in the conflict, finally stepped in. After Jessica attempted to have Dad sign documents that would have given her authority over the family trust established by my grandparents. "This isn't about taking sides between you and Bronson," Thomas told him bluntly. "This is about protecting you from someone who has a documented history of financial exploitation." The bank where Dad had kept his accounts for 30 years contacted him directly about unusual transfer patterns, triggering their fraud protection protocols. The transactions Jessica had assured him were rebalancing investments were actually moving funds into accounts only she could access. As Dad began questioning her actions more directly, Jessica accelerated her plans. She consulted a divorce attorney, seeking to establish maximum financial claims before Dad could protect his assets. Unknown to her, the attorney she chose was a former law school classmate of Michelle's, who discreetly alerted our family lawyer to the consultation. The final piece of evidence came from Marcus's father, Jack, a private investigator I had hired to document Jessica's activities. Jack compiled a comprehensive file that included financial records showing Jessica's pattern of transferring Dad's money, recordings of Jessica speaking disparagingly about Dad to friends, documentation of her meetings with her divorce attorney, evidence she had been in contact with her previous ex-husband's business competitors during their marriage, selling confidential information, proof she had lied about her education and professional background. Jack delivered this file directly to Dad at his office, along with a note from me. "I love you too much to let this continue. Please just look at the evidence." Dad later told me he spent the entire night reviewing the file, the pieces of his shattered reality finally reassembling into a clear picture of what had been happening. The woman he thought had brought love back into his life had been systematically exploiting him, isolating him, and preparing to leave him financially diminished, just as she had done twice before. Jessica's final performance came at a family gathering Aunt Linda had organized specifically to bring everything into the open. Dad had insisted Jessica attend, not telling her the true purpose of the meeting. As family members and friends each shared their observations and evidence, Jessica cycled through her usual tactics: tears, deflection, accusations of conspiracy against her. But this time, Dad wasn't swayed. When she turned to him expectantly, waiting for him to defend her as he always had, he simply said, "I've seen the bank records. Jessica, I know what you've been doing." Her mask dropped completely. The transformation was shocking to witness. The warm, loving woman vanished, replaced by cold fury. "You pathetic old man," she spat. "You were so desperate for someone to make you feel young again. You couldn't see what was happening right in front of you. Your precious son knew instantly what I was, but you were too blind to listen." Dad aged years in those moments, the full realization of his mistake crushing down on him. But he stood firm. "I want you out of my house tonight. My lawyer will contact yours about the divorce." Jessica's parting shot was aimed at me, You think you've won. But look what it cost you. Your father chose me over you. He threw you away from me. Remember that." She was wrong. I hadn't won anything. There was no victory in watching my father's heart break, in seeing him face the humiliation of having been so thoroughly deceived. But at least now he was free of her, and we had a chance to rebuild what had been broken. Jessica left the house that night, taking only her personal belongings. The prenuptial agreement Dad had insisted on, despite her objections, limited what she could claim in the divorce. The financial protections I had put in place prevented her from accessing most of the money she had attempted to divert. The legal case against her was strong enough that her attorney advised her to settle quickly and quietly. In the immediate aftermath, Dad was desperate to reconcile. He called multiple times daily, left voicemails filled with apologies and regrets. He showed up at my apartment with my favorite childhood meals, at my office with old family photos, anywhere he thought I might be willing to talk to him. Despite my relief that he was free from Jessica's manipulation, I maintained necessary distance. The wound of his betrayal was still raw. He had chosen her over me, had been willing to sever our relationship based on her manipulations. That wasn't something I could simply forgive, because the situation had resolved. "I need time, Dad," I told him during one of his unannounced visits. "What happened between us can't be fixed with an apology and a casserole." He nodded, accepting this with a sadness that reflected his understanding of how profoundly he had hurt me. "I'll give you the space you need. Just know that whenever you're ready, I'll be here." 2 weeks later, I received a letter from him, handwritten on the stationery Mom had given him years ago for special occasions. It was 10 pages long, a thorough accounting of his failures as a father, his blindness to Jessica's manipulation, and his profound regret for the pain he had caused. "I betrayed not just you," he wrote, "but the promise I made to your mother that I would always put your well-being first. There is no excuse for my behavior, no justification that would make it acceptable. I can only tell you that I was lost in a fog of manipulation that separated me from my values, my judgment, and most unforgivably, from you." The letter ended not with a plea for forgiveness, but with an acknowledgement that rebuilding trust would take time and consistent effort on his part, if I was willing to give him that chance. A month after Jessica's departure, I agreed to meet Dad for lunch at a neutral location, a deli we had both liked but rarely visited. The conversation was awkward at first, both of us carefully avoiding the most painful topics. Finally, I addressed what had happened directly. "You chose her over me, Dad. After everything we've been through together, you were willing to cut me out of your life because she demanded it." He didn't defend himself or make excuses. "Yes," he admitted, his voice breaking. "It was the worst mistake of my life, and I'll regret it until the day I die. I can't undo it. I can only try to be worthy of another chance." Over the following months, we began the difficult work of rebuilding. Dad started seeing a therapist who specialized in helping people who had been in manipulative relationships. He came to understand how Jessica had systematically exploited his grief and loneliness, how she had used his love for me as a weapon against both of us. I pursued my own therapy, working through the abandonment trauma that had been reactivated by Dad's betrayal. I had to confront difficult questions about forgiveness, boundaries, and what family truly means when tested by extreme circumstances. 6 months after the confrontation with Jessica, Dad and I resumed our Sunday fishing trips. The first few outings were subdued, both of us careful with our words. But gradually, the natural rhythm of our relationship began to reemerge. Out on the water, away from distractions, we had the conversations we needed to have. "I should have seen what she was doing," Dad said one morning, as the sun rose over the lake. "The signs were all there. You saw them immediately. She was skilled at what she did," I reminded him. "She'd had practice, and she targeted you. when you were vulnerable. That doesn't excuse my blindness, especially to how she was treating you, he insisted. I keep asking myself how I could have chosen her over you. Manipulation works by isolating people from their support systems, I explained, sharing what I had learned in therapy. She didn't start with the ultimatum. She spent months laying the groundwork, creating small divisions between us, reframing your perception of me and our relationship. By the time she delivered that final blow, she had already prepared you to make the choice she wanted. Dad's eyes filled with tears. The fact that you can understand that you're willing to analyze it, rather than just hate me for it, shows more maturity than I demonstrated through this entire ordeal. The healing continued as we re-established our family connections. Aunt Linda, Uncle Thomas, and the cousins I had grown up with welcomed Dad back into the fold without recrimination. Dad formally apologized to each person Jessica had driven away, taking full responsibility for allowing the relationships to be damaged. My business continued to thrive, now completely independent from Dad's finances. The accessibility software we developed received industry recognition and was being implemented by major technology companies. Dad attended the award ceremony where I was honored for innovation, sitting in the front row, his face radiating pride. The most important lessons I took from the experience were about self-protection without bitterness. I had learned to establish boundaries while still maintaining the capacity for trust and vulnerability. I had seen how even the strongest people can be manipulated under the right circumstances, and how important it is to have multiple perspectives when evaluating complex emotional situations. Dad gained wisdom about the difference between genuine love and exploitative attachment, about the importance of maintaining independence within relationships, and about the danger of allowing any person to isolate you from your support network. I understand now that real love expands your world, he told me during one of our deeper conversations. Jessica contracted mine, cutting away people and interests that didn't serve her purposes. Your mother always encouraged me to maintain my other relationships, to pursue my own interests. That's the difference I couldn't see until it was almost too late. 2 years after Jessica's departure, Dad and I had established a new relationship, different from what we had before, but strong in its own way. We had both been changed by the experience, becoming more thoughtful about the people we allowed into our lives, and more appreciative of authentic connections. The fundamental lesson we both carried forward was that relationships must be earned continuously through respect, honesty, and care. Dad had earned back my trust through consistent actions that demonstrated his priorities had realigned with his true values. I had learned that forgiveness doesn't mean erasing boundaries, but establishing healthier ones. You saved me, Dad said simply during a quiet moment on the lake, almost 3 years to the day after Jessica had delivered her ultimatum. Not just financially, but from losing myself completely. I can never thank you enough for not giving up on me, even when I gave up on us. That's what family does, I replied. The real kind, not the counterfeit version Jessica tried to create. As our boat drifted on the calm water, I reflected on how preparing for the worst, while hoping for the best, had allowed our relationship to eventually rebuild. The plan I had set in motion months before Dad's betrayal had protected us from the worst financial and legal consequences of Jessica's manipulation. But it was the deeper work of forgiveness and reestablishing trust that had truly saved our family. I hope this story helps anyone facing similar situations recognize the warning signs earlier than we did. Have you ever had to protect someone you love from a person who was harmful to them? How did you balance respecting their choices with preventing serious damage? Share your experiences in the comments below. And don't forget to like and subscribe if this story resonated with you. Remember, sometimes the most important plans are the ones we hope we never need to use.